Top 5 actors Clint Eastwood hated the most. For decades, Clint Eastwood has carried himself with the kind of quiet intensity that doesn't need volume to demand respect. He doesn't shout, he doesn't posture, he simply looks, and the room falls in line. But behind that calm, almost icy demeanor, there's a lesser-known side of him Hollywood insiders whisper about, a side defined not by anger or outbursts, but by silence. The kind of silence that ends careers. Because if there's one thing Eastwood doesn't tolerate, it's someone wasting his time. Across 6 decades, he built a reputation for running film sets with surgical efficiency. One take, zero chaos, no drama. And if an actor couldn't match his rhythm, if they showed up unprepared, unfocused, or too wrapped up in their own process, Clint didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He simply never worked with them again. That quiet, unspoken blacklist became Hollywood legend, a list of stars who crossed paths with Eastwood once and never got the invitation back. Some of the names are expected. Others are shocking. A few became permanent reminders of how far Clint would go to protect his creative process. So today, we're uncovering the 5 actors who pushed Eastwood past his breaking point, the behind-the-scenes stories that fueled his private grudges, and why even the biggest names in cinema were no match for one man's unshakable work ethic. And to understand it all, we need to start at the bottom of the list, with a Hollywood icon whose behavior went head-to-head with Eastwood's core values. Number 5. Richard Burton. Richard Burton was the kind of actor whose talent could fill a room before he even walked into it. A Shakespearean giant, a global celebrity, a man whose voice alone could command an audience. But when he and Clint Eastwood teamed up for the 1968 war classic Where Eagles Dare, their working styles collided so violently that Eastwood quietly decided, never again. On the surface, the two looked like a perfect match, rugged, stoic performers known for their intensity. But behind the camera, Burton was living a very different life. Rumors from the set suggest that his nights were loud, long, and alcohol-heavy, while his mornings were unpredictable. As one crew member later hinted, Clint would show up before sunrise, lines memorized, ready to roll. Burton, you never knew which version of him was coming through the door. And Clint noticed everything. The breaking point reportedly came during an important exposition scene, the kind of dialogue-heavy moment Eastwood treats like a precision task. Burton struggled with the lines, stumbling through take after take. 10, 15, 20. Each one further from Eastwood's one-take philosophy. Clint didn't argue, didn't correct, didn't complain. He simply stepped aside, crossed his arms, and waited in silence. When someone asked if he was annoyed, he just muttered, "I'm getting paid by the picture, not the hour." Short, quiet, and sharper than any outburst. But what truly sealed Burton's fate wasn't the hangovers or the delays. It was the attitude. Rumors claim he occasionally joked about the movie being just a paycheck, brushing off the production as if it didn't deserve real commitment. For Eastwood, who approaches every role with laser focus, whether it's a prestige drama or a pulpy action flick, that was the one line no actor could cross. Years later, when asked what he thought of Burton, Clint gave a cold, almost surgical answer. Talented guy, wasted talent. And that was it. No anger, no story, just a final verdict, and a door quietly closed forever. But if Burton frustrated Eastwood with unpredictability, the next name on the list pushed him in a completely different way. A way that was far more personal and far more draining. And that's where things get even more complicated. Number 4. Gene Seberg. Gene Seberg's story is one of the most tragic in Hollywood history. And her brief time working with Clint Eastwood sits at the crossroads of turmoil, pressure, and 2 completely incompatible worlds. When the two starred together in the 1969 musical Paint Your Wagon, Eastwood was already stepping far outside his comfort zone. He wasn't a singer, he wasn't a dancer, and he definitely wasn't a fan of sprawling musical productions. but he showed up prepared, disciplined, and determined to get it right. Seberg, on the other hand, was fighting battles far bigger than the film itself. Behind the scenes, crew members have long whispered that Seberg seemed emotionally overwhelmed throughout the production. Some days, she arrived hours late. Other days, she seemed distant, distracted, or on the verge of tears. And while Eastwood approached the musical like a soldier on a mission, Seberg appeared to float in and out of focus, her mind somewhere far beyond the set. One choreographer later recalled how stark the contrast was. Clint attacked the singing and dancing with this quiet determination. Jean looked like she was carrying the weight of the world. The tension rose during simple dialogue scenes that should have taken 1 or 2 takes. Seberg would stop mid-line to question motivations, rewrite emotional beats, or retreat to her trailer for long stretches. For most directors, that might be manageable. But for Clint, whose style depends on momentum and instinct, it was suffocating. One script supervisor remembered a moment that summed it all up. Eastwood and Seberg had a calm, gentle walk and talk scene. Nothing complicated. Clint had every line locked in. Seberg stopped the scene 5 times to ask about her character's internal emotions. By the 6th interruption, Clint simply walked off set, took a breath, returned, and quietly said, "Let's finish it." For him, that was the equivalent of shouting. But what truly locked Seberg onto Eastwood's private blacklist came after filming wrapped. When Paint Your Wagon underperformed, Seberg gave several interviews where she implied Clint's wooden acting and limited musical background had dragged the film down. She didn't attack him directly, but the insinuation was there. And Clint heard it. He never fired back publicly. He never criticized her, especially as her life spiraled into tragedy. But those close to him say he froze at the mere mention of her name. One friend claimed Clint's response was always the same. Some people aren't built for this work, and that's all I'll say. For Eastwood, unpredictability was something he could tolerate, but being publicly blamed, even indirectly, for a film's shortcomings, that crossed a line he never forgot. And yet, as difficult as Seberg's on-set energy was for him, the next actor didn't overwhelm Eastwood emotionally. He challenged him head-on, and Clint does not back down easily. If Seberg tested his patience, the next man tested his pride. 3. Tommy Lee Jones. When Clint Eastwood and Tommy Lee Jones worked together on the 1993 thriller In the Line of Fire, Hollywood expected sparks, but not the kind that actually flew behind the scenes. On paper, the two seemed like a dream pairing, grounded, stoic, no-nonsense performers with reputations for intensity. But once the cameras rolled, it became clear that their similarities weren't going to complement each other. They were going to collide. Jones is the kind of actor who enters a scene like he's kicking down a door, fully locked into character, fully charged, and fully committed. Eastwood, meanwhile, believes in something closer to stillness, controlled energy, instinct over force, and not a single ounce more than the scene requires. 2 powerful styles that, when mixed, created an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife. According to crew members, the tension started small. During dialogue scenes, Jones would allegedly push his performance further and further, adding intensity, even when the scene didn't require it. Not to show off, that's just how he works. But Eastwood saw it differently. He believes acting is about listening, giving space, and letting the moment breathe. Jones, however, filled every moment to the edge. Then came the moment everyone on set still talks about. During a heated confrontation scene, the director called cut, but Jones didn't stop. He stayed in character, staring Clint down like the scene was still happening. A sound technician later said, "The whole room went silent." Clint didn't blink. He just turned and walked away. To Eastwood, staying in character after cut isn't dedication. It's unnecessary noise. But the real fracture happened during a disagreement over how one particular scene should play out. Jones reportedly pushed for a more aggressive take on the moment, offering ideas, interpretations, and emotional angles. Eastwood respected the input, but when the director made his decision, that was supposed to be the end of it. Jones didn't see it that way. He pushed again, then again. Multiple takes later, the frustration was unmistakable. One assistant director recalled Clint's brief but cutting comment afterward. "Life's too short for this," and that was it. No argument, no dramatic showdown. Just a quiet decision, probably made in that exact moment, that this collaboration would be their last. After the film's success, casting teams suggested Jones for several Eastwood-directed projects. The answer was always the same, delivered in Clint's dry, almost polite tone. "Good actor, not my fit." For most filmmakers, Jones would have been a dream. For Eastwood, he represented everything he avoids: confrontation, excess, and an approach that drained the simplicity he values in filmmaking. And yet, the storm he experienced with Jones was nothing compared to what came next, because the next actor on Clint's blacklist is someone universally praised for talent, someone whose commitment to his craft is legendary. But for Eastwood, that commitment crossed into something he simply couldn't work with. 2. Leonardo DiCaprio. When Clint Eastwood cast Leonardo DiCaprio in the 2011 biopic J. Edgar, Hollywood buzzed with excitement. One of the greatest actors of his generation paired with one of the most respected directors alive. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything, if you ask people who were on that set. DiCaprio is famously intense. He studies, researches, analyzes, and revisits every emotional beat until he understands a character down to the bone. His process is deep, layered, and sometimes exhausting. Eastwood's process, the exact opposite. 1 take if possible. 2 if necessary. 3 only in an emergency. So, when filming began, it was like watching 2 different creative languages try to communicate. Crew members have whispered for years about DiCaprio arriving with notebooks full of research, psychological profiles, historical documents, character motivations mapped down to microscopic details. Before each scene, he would ask questions, offer interpretations, and explore alternatives. Clint's direction, meanwhile, could be summed up in 3 words: "Let's roll it." The contrast became impossible to ignore during the film's heavy emotional scenes. One camera operator described the moment that broke the atmosphere entirely. A raw, gut-wrenching breakdown scene. DiCaprio delivered it perfectly on the first take. Everyone on set felt it. But Leo wanted another, then another, then another. By the 6th take, Eastwood wasn't even watching the monitor anymore. He had quietly stepped aside, grabbed a coffee, and waited for the storm to pass. For a director who believes the first take is often the truest version, the repetition wasn't refinement. It was destruction. A long-time assistant director put it bluntly. Clint doesn't dislike Leo. He dislikes the process that created Leo. And that's exactly where the real fracture happened. Eastwood interpreted DiCaprio's push for more takes as a lack of trust, not in himself, but in Clint's ability to know when a moment was captured. For a filmmaker with Eastwood's experience, that stings more than ego. It hits the core of his artistic philosophy. Even so, both men stayed professional. They respected each other's reputations. They delivered a finished film they were proud of. But the moment the final shot wrapped, something subtle but permanent changed. A producer who watched Clint walk off set that last day remembered him saying, almost under his breath, "Some folks climb the mountain. Some measure the mountain. I just want to reach the top and enjoy the view." Everyone who heard it knew exactly who he meant. Since then, DiCaprio's name has never again appeared on any Eastwood casting shortlists, even when roles seemed tailor-made for him. When asked privately about working with Leo again, Clint reportedly offered one of his classic, razor-sharp summaries. "Great actor, wrong style." And that was that another door closed quietly, permanently. But if DiCaprio represented a clash of process, the final name on Eastwood's blacklist represents something far deeper. A clash of philosophy. A rivalry built not on one disagreement, but on two completely opposite views of what filmmaking should be. Number 1. Barbra Streisand. Barbra Streisand is the only person on Clint Eastwood's blacklist who never acted with him, never stood on his set, and never filmed a scene by his side. And yet, she sits at the very top of the list, higher than Burton, higher than Jones, higher even than DiCaprio. Why? Because, for Eastwood, Streisand doesn't represent a difficult co-star. She represents a creative philosophy he fundamentally rejects. Their quiet, long-distance feud began in the early 1980s, when both were rising as actor-directors. Two Hollywood giants building reputations on completely opposite ends of the film-making spectrum, Eastwood was known for speed, precision, and instinct. Streisand was known for perfectionism, control, and exhaustive detail. Where Clint could shoot an entire film in 40 days, Streisand might still be working on the same scene. Where Clint trusted the first take, Streisand was rumored to shoot dozens to find the perfect rhythm. To Eastwood, that wasn't dedication. It was suffocation. A producer who worked with both of them, never together, summed it up perfectly. Clint admired talent. What he disliked was obsession. The tension simmered quietly, until awards season poured gasoline on it. In 1991, Streisand directed The Prince of Tides, a film that earned multiple Academy Award nominations, but she was famously snubbed for Best Director. The industry erupted in debates about sexism and bias. Many publicly supported her, but behind closed doors, Eastwood reportedly offered a very different take. According to insiders who heard his comments, he said something along the lines of, "If she made decisions faster, maybe she'd finish more than one film every decade." A textbook Eastwood line, dry as dust and sharp enough to draw blood. Streisand, according to those close to her, did not take that lightly. Rumor has it she criticized Eastwood's directing style by suggesting his efficiency came at the cost of emotional depth. And for Clint, who believes simplicity is the purest form of emotion, that hit harder than any insult. But the real breaking point came with The Bridges of Madison County. Before Eastwood took over the film, Streisand had been attached to direct, and possibly star. She had a very specific vision for the story, layered backstories, expanded character arcs, rich emotional detours. A much more elaborate version. When Clint stepped in, he gutted almost everything she planned. He carved the story down to its most essential elements. No fluff, no subplots. Just the quiet ache between two people who meet for 4 days and change each other forever. It was the ultimate repudiation of Streisand's version. Intentional or not? One screenwriter who worked on both drafts revealed, "Barbara's script was full-course fine dining. Clint's version was a perfectly grilled steak with salt and pepper, and he wanted everyone to know which one tasted better." The film went on to become one of Eastwood's most celebrated works. It earned Meryl Streep an Oscar nomination. It proved that simplicity could be devastatingly emotional. And for many industry watchers, it felt like Clint delivered a silent message. My way works. Since then, the tension has never thawed. The two avoid working together. They avoid speaking about each other directly. But Eastwood has dropped indirect jabs over the years. One of his most pointed was when he said in an interview, "After too many takes, you're not finding truth anymore. You're manufacturing it." To most people, that's just a filmmaking philosophy. To those aware of the rivalry, it sounded like a direct shot. And that's why Barbra Streisand sits at number 1. Not because she offended him on set, but because her entire approach to filmmaking represents everything Eastwood refuses to compromise on: efficiency versus perfectionism, instinct versus analysis, momentum versus meticulousness. Two titans, two worlds that can never overlap. But Eastwood's blacklist doesn't just reveal who frustrated him, it reveals the blueprint of his entire creative identity. Which leads us to the deeper truth behind this mysterious list. Clint Eastwood's private blacklist isn't just a collection of names. It's a map of the values that shaped one of Hollywood's most unwavering careers. Each person on that list represents a different kind of clash. Richard Burton brought chaos where Clint demanded clarity. Gene Seberg arrived with emotional storms that disrupted the rhythm he relied on. Tommy Lee Jones pushed intensity beyond the frame. Leonardo DiCaprio dissected moments Clint believed should simply be felt. And Barbra Streisand stood as the ultimate opposite, a filmmaker who built her art on endless refinement, the very thing Clint spent his life avoiding. Together, these stories form a portrait of a man who never yelled, never argued, and never needed a dramatic confrontation to make his point. Clint operated with a quieter kind of authority, one that didn't punish publicly, but simply erased names from future call sheets. No second chances, no extended conversations, just a silent understanding that the collaboration wasn't meant to repeat. And yet, what these stories reveal isn't bitterness, it's boundaries. Eastwood has always believed that filmmaking is an act of instinct. Capture the truth before it slips away. Trust the moment before it becomes artificial, and surround yourself with people who can meet you at that pace. Not slow you down, distract you, or drown the moment in overthinking. His blacklist isn't fueled by ego. It's fueled by a commitment to preserving the purity of the process that defined him. Yes, it's dramatic, surprising, even a little shocking to see some of Hollywood's biggest icons on that list. But it also makes sense. Art isn't created in a vacuum. It's built on chemistry, momentum, and trust. And when those elements break, even the world's greatest talents can find themselves quietly shut out. So as you think about these stories, ask yourself, do you prefer directors who chase the perfect take, or directors who believe the perfect take happens only once? Is Eastwood's one-and-done philosophy a creative superpower or a risky gamble? And if you were in his shoes, who would you invite back to set, and who would never get the second call? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of cinema's most private rivalries, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more untold stories from behind the camera. Thanks for watching. And remember, in Clint Eastwood's world, the moment you break his trust, the moment is gone forever.